Susie Wiles is US President Donald Trump's chief of staff, the first woman to hold that position in the White House. Widely regarded as the second most powerful person in Washington, she's seen as a Trump loyalist who stuck with him since the beginning of his first presidential campaign. When others abandoned him after the January 6th insurrection, Wiles stuck by Trump's side. But it turns out she may not be that loyal after all. Over the past year, Wiles has spoken very candidly and very on the record with Vanity Fair writer Chris Whipple, revealing the chaos and court intrigues at the heart of the Trump administration. She's provided so much material, in fact, that the article has been published in 2 parts. This is one extract from the piece. Trump, she told me, as an alcoholic's personality. Vance's conversion from never Trumper to MAGA acolyte, she said, has been sort of political. The vice president, she added, has been a conspiracy theorist for a decade. Russell Vought, architect of the notorious Project 2025 and head of the Office of Management and Budget, is a right-wing absolute zealot. When I asked her what she thought of Musk reposting a tweet about public sector workers killing millions under Hitler, Stalin and Mao, she replied, I think that's when he's microdosing. She says she doesn't have first-hand knowledge. One topic explored at length is Trump's relationship to the Epstein files, with the article saying this. Wiles told me she underestimated the potency of the scandal, whether he was an American CIA asset, a Mossad asset, whether all these rich, important men went to that nasty island and did unforgivable things to young girls. She said, I mean, I kind of knew it, but it's never anything I paid a bit of attention to. Wiles told me she'd read what she calls the Epstein file, and she said, Trump is in the file, and we know he's in the file. And he's not in the file doing anything awful. Wiles said that Trump was on Epstein's plane. He's on the manifest. They were, sort of young, single, whatever. I know it's a passé word, but sort of young, single playboys together. The people that are inordinately interested in Epstein are the new members of the Trump coalition. The people I think about at the time. Because I want to make sure that they are not Trump voters, they're Republican voters, Wiles said. It's the Joe Rogan listeners. It's the people that are sort of new to our world. It's not the MAGA base. Other topics include the Trump tariffs, the Gaza plan, and the use of ICE to round up and deport undocumented immigrants. It also covers Trump's attacks on civilian boats off the Venezuelan coast, with the 87 people so far killed in drone strikes being described as narco-terrorists. This is from the article. Over lunch, Wiles told me about Trump's Venezuela strategy. He wants to keep on blowing up boats until Maduro cries uncle, and people way smarter than me on that say that he will. Wiles' statement appears to contradict the administration's official stance that blowing up boats is about drug interdiction, not regime change. Some of Wiles' most colourful descriptions are of ex-owner Elon Musk, whose evisceration of US international aid programs she is highly critical of. It also includes this description of the billionaire. He's a complete solo actor, said Wiles of Trump's billionaire pal, who led the scorched earth blitz known as the Department of Government Efficiency. Wiles described Musk as something akin to a jacked-up Nosferatu. The challenge with Elon is keeping up with him, she told me. He's an avowed ketamine user, and he sleeps in a sleeping bag in the executive office building in the daytime. And he's an odd duck, as I think geniuses are. It's not helpful, but he is his own person. Quite a liberal use of the word genius there, in my opinion. Now, the publication of the article in Vanity Fair took all of Washington by surprise. Wiles responded with this. The article published early this morning is a disingenuously framed hit piece on me and the finest president, White House staff and cabinet in history. Significant context was disregarded, and much of what I and others said about the team and the president was left out of the story. I assume, after reading it, that this was done to paint an overwhelmingly chaotic and negative narrative about the president and our team. The truth is that the White House has already accomplished more in 11 months than any other president has accomplished in 8 years, and that is due to the unmatched leadership and vision of President Trump, for whom I have been honoured to work for the better part of a decade. None of us will stop our relentless pursuit of making America great again. Seems like a lot of arse covering from Susan there, in my opinion, because a lot of this stuff, we kind of already had guessed. I don't think anyone's surprised to learn that Elon Musk is on ketamine, for example, or indeed that J.D. Vance acts like a conspiracy theorist. I mean, we can all see it with our own eyes. It's just nice to have it confirmed in writing with someone close to the administration. Dahlia, what did you make of these revelations? If they're not surprising, they are certainly entertaining.
I have to say, I am quite perplexed by Susan Wiles sort of saying, they printed exactly what I said verbatim, and that makes this a hit piece. And it's like, okay, yes, them printing exactly what you said verbatim has been quite damaging for you because the things that you said were insane. But I think, and it's surprising because whenever anyone who's involved in politics or anywhere near the media knows that anything you say, like any whole sentence that you say to a journalist, can and will be printed verbatim, especially if it's as salacious as saying, Trump is in the Epstein files, we all know he is, or Elon Musk is on ketamine. I mean, wasn't born yesterday. I'm surprised to think that she would be that naive. But on the question of it looking chaotic, I think that, yes, like just because something looks and seems chaotic doesn't necessarily mean that it is not achieving what it is set out to achieve. And I think a lot of the chaos of Trump's current presidency is a form of engineered chaos, because when we look at the kind of heart of what the Trump presidency is trying to achieve, it's essentially to finish the job that was started by Thatcher and that many of his neoliberal predecessors had been trying to do, which is to completely transform the nature of the state, to decimate the post-war welfare and regulating state, and to bolster the parts of the state that can discipline and criminalize without restraint. That has been the goal of the Trump presidency, and that is not an entirely significant break from what many of his particularly Republican predecessors had been trying to achieve. I just don't think that they felt like they could go as hard and fast as Trump is going. And, they do it under the guise of cutting DEI or government inefficiency or whatever, but ultimately it is about a neoliberal reorganization of the state. And that is going to look chaotic. It is going to be chaotic. It is going to have a move fast and break things kind of energy. And I think there is a playing with chaos and playing with a spectacle of chaos, because there has to be a kind of cloud of unpredictability that is ultimately confusing and distracting to the public, whilst ensuring that nothing that you do actually upsets those who have the power to stop you, because it is ultimately aligned with what many of the political and financial elite in the US and more globally want, which is less regulation, no welfare state, and increased punitive powers of the state. What I think might have happened here is maybe Susan Wiles got a little bit carried away with how comfortable this administration has been in projecting a kind of chaotic disregard for norms, and instead has maybe stepped over the line a little bit, because I don't think that it's in the plan to out Elon Musk's alleged ketamine problem.
That's true. I think that's very, very true there. And the problem, of course, is that when it comes to what they've done, I mean, you look at the Doge cuts to US aid, and of course, it's a very kind of famous soft power institution that the US uses, but for all the bad things that it does, what Elon Musk didn't cut that stuff. What he did cut was stuff that was there to feed hundreds of thousands of people, and that's led to deaths, huge numbers of deaths in the global south. And when you listen to what she's saying, she obviously doesn't support that. She doesn't support the cutting away of US soft power through aid programs. And she said it herself, like, I'm not here to get people to become Trumpists. I'm here to get people to become Republicans. And she knows that there's a post-Trump future, right? She knows there's a post-Trump future, and ensuring that it's clear that once that happens, there needs to be a through line from the callous disregard for even basic tenets of the Constitution from the current administration, that wanting to temper that and at least be able to make sure that the people who are currently in charge don't totally undermine the Republican Party's image more broadly to their new electorate she's talking about there, then that will be the future that she is looking towards. Because her role as an advisor, as a chief of staff, that has legs. Donald Trump's career as a politician, that ends in 3 years' time. Now, the Vanity Fair article may be pretty wild, but it's nowhere near as wild as the photographs that accompany it. Photographer Christopher Anderson, who's an experienced political photographer, very clearly had something to say when he took these diabolical pictures, and it's nothing good. Take this one, for example, a tightly cropped, untouched up shot of 28-year-old White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. According to dermatologists and a plastic surgeon who spoke to the cut, those dots around her lips are injection marks, presumably for recent filler. Not airbrushing them out seems pretty deliberate. There's this less than flattering extreme close-up of Vice President J.D. Vance, though he at least appears to have had a sense of humour about it. According to the Daily Beast, he quipped during the shoot, "I'll give you $100 for every person you make look really shitty compared to me, and $1,000 if it's Marco Rubio, although I assume you probably get denied entry to the US if you have this on your phone." There's also this portrait of Dan Scavino, Trump's deputy chief of staff, which seems pretty focused on, let's just say, his distinctive hairstyle. Scavino was formerly Trump's head of social media and is credited with having used Twitter to connect the president with white nationalists and the alt-right. Dahlia, would you be happy if in a big multi-page spread they'd use photos of you that look like this?
I mean, on the one hand, when I first saw these pictures, I was like, who cares? Like, I don't think anyone would come off well in that extreme a close up. And like, I don't care if the White House press secretary has somewhat questionable lip filler, injector, whatever. But the great irony of it is I think that more than anything else in this piece, this will have aggravated Trump more than anything. Because whilst I don't necessarily care what his press secretary looks like, Trump most certainly does. Trump is very, very obsessed, and the whole MAGA project is very, very obsessed with aesthetics, and not just any aesthetics, but the aesthetics of women that represent the project. That's why we have this sort of Mar-a-Lago face where, you know, women kind of go in looking sort of like normal human women, and then they come out the other side with the identical shade of blonde, you know, and a very particular hyper femme, like blonde American look. And that is a really important part of the political project of MAGA. It is very much about, you know, projecting an idea that this is what an American woman looks like. And there's something about there being a close-up, you know, when the fact that when you look at that under a microscope, not only is it artificial, but actually when you really look at it, it looks quite strange and it looks quite unappealing. It's actually a very brilliant photographic move. And it's something that Trump will have understood as a slight, not just on these individuals, but on the political project as a whole, quite effectively. You know, it reminds me of, you know, Trump kind of comes from the Fox News school of doing politics. And, you know, Roger Ailes famously, who was the CEO and chairman of Fox News, famously would watch Fox News with the sound off, because as far as he was concerned, the aesthetics of the political project were as important as anything that anyone was saying. And there's something quite genius about showing that not only is it artificial, but when you look at it really up close, it's quite unappealing.
Now, it is quite funny to me because I hear very frequently, or at least I read very frequently in the comment sections, lots of conservatives, especially Republicans and MAGA conservatives, will say things like, I love being a right-winger, I love being a conservative because our women are much more attractive than the liberal women. I'm like, well, I may be ugly, but at least I'm not a fascist.